So we have reached the end of Chapter 12, and the final lesson of Chapter 12 is on the Chinese Revolution. And if you click on the Chinese Revolution here on Google Classroom, you will see 4 rectangles. Now the main objective is to write an LEQ about China. We are soon to be taking that test, so I need you prepared. If you need a little reiteration, reminder, here's our old friend Mr. Heimler to take us through an LEQ one more time. And we started class with this article, so please read this article first before you do anything. And once you read this article, then we can get into the PowerPoint, which I hope equips you with enough knowledge to write a proper LEQ. That is my hope. And China turned communist, and I want to reiterate a point I've made several times. People don't adopt communism when life is good. Now, for 150 years, China's life was not good. Terrible, horrible civil wars and foreign invasions and being behind the industrialized world, being late to the table and industrializing. It was a very rough stretch of time. So our starting point. So again, I asked you to read this article. Now, this article came from a source called The Onion. Now, every year I do this, some students catch on pretty quickly that it is satire. Some people think it is serious. So just a little historiography moment. Is a source good or bad? Is it reputable or not? Is it chocolate or doo-doo? Okay, they're both brown. I only want one of those two things. So, friendly reminder, how do you spot fake news? Look at the source. Ask what the source is. Check the author. Is it a credible author? Check the date. Check your biases. Read beyond just what's there. Look for supporting sources. Ask yourself, is it a joke? If it might be satire, okay, take a second to say, is it actually satire? And then ask the experts. So, this is a little reminder as you go out into the world. Know the difference between a good source and a bad source. This was satire. However, it did make the point that the Chinese people have tremendous censorship. That is true. That's why this article hugged the line between reality and satire. So anyway, now here's the actual history. This is real. This is not satire. Hey, look, a source. University of New Mexico. Probably a decent source. You can even check this person out, this Jeffrey Knockel guy, and you'll see he's on the up and up. So anyway, the Chinese do block a ton of information to its people, even here in modern times, okay? So if you look at why they block it, political. If it goes against communism, it is blocked. Prurient means like dirty, nasty, pornographic sort of stuff, which they block. News that goes against the regime, they will block. If you are a political dissident, you're somebody who is actively against the regime, they block you. So a lot of it is based on keeping people obedient to the government. If you take all of this information, that's really the crux of what the Chinese people are looking to do. Keep the people obedient to the government and not questioning the government, okay? Now, as for the story of communism in China, we started at the present and working our way back. So on October 1st, 1949, Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong declared the creation of the People's Republic of China, or the PRC. The announcement ended the costly full-scale civil war between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalist Party. These nationalists left China and established Taiwan, and it's still very contentious between Taiwan and China today. Now, Mao Zedong did it the hard way, called the Long Walk, and he went from village to village to village, winning the hearts and minds, and that effort that he put in and his cronies put in resulted in victory. So 1949, not ancient history, China becomes an official communist nation. And this guy, Mao Zedong, ruled all the way until 1976. I was alive in 1976. He was the principal Chinese Marxist. Okay, remember the Communist Manifesto, Marx. Marxist, Karl Marx. Okay, Chinese Marxist theorist, soldier, and statesman who led his country's communist revolution. Mao was the leader of the Chinese Communist Party from 1935 until his death, and he was the chairman or chief of state of the People's Republic of China from 1949 to 1959, and chairman of the party also until his death. He gained control by getting the support of peasants and executing his enemies. Kind of a little Stalin flavor there, but he did win the hearts and minds by going from village to village to village, explaining to the peasants why his way of doing things is better than the old way, or was better than the old way. Okay, so he implemented something called the Great Leap Forward. Here's a nice heaping helping of propaganda. Always enjoy propaganda. And the Great Leap Forward was a campaign undertaken by the Chinese Communists between 1958 and early 1960 to organize its vast population. There's a ton of Chinese people, especially in large-scale rural communes, to meet China's industrial and agricultural problems. It was a failure of remarkable proportions, with an estimated 55 million people losing their lives. So as you can see, these atrocities that coincide with communist regimes, there are just one after the other after the other. Total horror show, 55 million people losing their lives because of this policy. So he had to save face. Obviously, you're going to have a pretty upset nation if you have 55 million people die. So what he did is try to kind of revamp his image with the Cultural Revolution, and again, focusing on children. Okay, the Japanese did it, the Germans did it. Children are impressionable, and it just takes one generation to change things around. So anyway, in 1966, Mao Zedong launched the Cultural Revolution in order to reassert his authority over the Chinese government. Believing that current communist leaders were taking the party and China itself in the wrong direction, Mao called on the nation's youth to purge the impure elements of Chinese society and revive the revolutionary spirit. It resulted in economic calamity and another 1.5 million people losing their lives. In the Little Red Book, these children had to read from it every day. You had to carry it with you. And this is indoctrination on a huge scale. Bear in mind, a lot of these people are still alive. This is 1966. This is not ancient history. So China's role in the Cold War. Okay, I think a lot of times people say Russia versus America, the Cold War. China certainly had a role in the Cold War. Now, mainly their support of the North Koreans during the Korean War until we got that stalemate on the 38th parallel. And that was a huge proxy war in the Cold War, and China was the main player in that, or one of the main players. And then the Red Scare, this collective fear that, you know, the domino theory. If one group, one nation becomes communist, they'll all turn communist. And the Russians were probably number one, but China's number two in terms of this Red Scare, this fear of communism that was persistent during the Cold War. Okay? Now, we went into more detail in class, obviously more detail. You're going to be looking up when you do your LEQ, but hopefully that gives you an overview of what China was doing during this time period, and you can add it to another list of communist regimes, resulting in huge calamities. Add it to the list. All right, everybody, we made it through Chapter 12. Chapter 13 ahead. Thank you for watching.